Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to talk about VIN 0877, just call it 877. This is a ultrasonic blue mica with LA10 interior, which is the Stratus gray or kind of the white colored interior. And so as far as what it is, so right now, this is July, the end of July 2025, and this car popped up, well, it's been for sale since June, and it's been for sale at Carvana. Originally, it started off at almost $60,000, and they've slowly been dropping the price, $59,000, $58,000, $57,000, $56,000, $55,000. So right now it's for sale for $55,000, and it has about 35,000 miles. The kicker, though, is it has 6 or 7 owners, depending on if you look at Carfax or AutoCheck or Epic VIN. The point being, it's changed hands a lot for being such a low-mile vehicle, and I think one of those owners was, it looks like it was registered in Texas and somebody put it in their Montana LLC, but the car remained in Texas. So that, of course, increases the owner count. So that's why I say 6 or 7, depending on how you look at it. Little production info on this car first before we dive into it. So it's one of 269 ultrasonic blue mica cars that exist for the US 49 market. It's the 4th most common color, but again, there's not very many of them, 269 cars that exist. When you break it down, USB plus the LA10 white interior, there's only 71 of them that were made throughout all 5 years. Of course, Stratus Gray was only offered on 2016 and 2017 in North America. If you break it down just as to the 2016s, there's 177 ultrasonic blue mica. Of those, 67 had Stratus Gray. So still a pretty low production car, but it's not like 1 of 2, 1 of 5, whatever. There's quite a few of them out there with this combination. First off, looking at the Carfax, the Epic VIN, the AutoCheck history, as I said before, it's a 6 or 7 owner car, but it has 0 damage reported on any of those. And I say 0 damage reported because I will get to another fact here shortly. There is some, I would say, prior paint work that has been discovered on this car, but it's not reported. So it's been done outside of insurance. So other than that, like, it looks clean. If you're just from the outside looking in, you look at just on paper, it looks like, you know, other than a decent amount of owners, it looks okay. You know, you see service history. It's been well serviced, oil changes, things like that. So then we'll dive into the Lexus service history. So that's what I have here on my notes. Yeah, so the last time this car was at the Lexus dealer for service was January of 2023. So here it is, mid 2025. So you're talking about 2.5 years ago is the last time that it's been inside a Lexus dealer, and it's lived in Texas where we have several Lexus dealers. You know, that's beside the point, but with a low mile car, you don't expect constant service like, you know, as if this had 100,000 miles or something like that. So diving into the service history, there's not a whole lot to go on. Basically, the fuel pump, the high pressure fuel pump recall has been done in 2018. 2017, there was a note about ordering some touch-up paint. That's not unusual. 2022, they had all of the windows tinted, but it noted a cracked windscreen. So I would assume between then and now that the windscreen, the windshield has been replaced. So if you were going to go look at this car, I would make sure it says OEM or you know, Lexus, whatever. Well, hold on. What's it say here? Yeah. It does say Lexus on the windshield. So if it's an OEM windshield, it will say Lexus in the driver's corner there. If it's aftermarket, you know, Safe Light, something like that, it'll say Fuyo or some other brand like that. But there's nothing wrong with aftermarket windscreens. Just know that not all of them are created equal. So the windshield would be something I would just take a little closer look at if you're going to look at this car. The only other thing that I see on service history in January 23 was an oil change, and they replaced one rear tire because they said it was coming apart. That's it. Again, not unusual for these cars. The tires don't last very long. 20,000 miles if you're lucky. Let's jump into the whole thing with Carvana. So these cars generally, when they come up for sale, the good ones sell pretty quickly. And so the fact that this car has been for sale for about 2 months now, that already tells me, you know, there's something we're not seeing. And so Carvana, if you get into details on their website or through their app, they'll show you what they did and what they replaced. And so on what I have from their inspection report, it says they fixed or repaired the wheels, which is probably curb rash. They refinished them or touched them up, something like that. Did an oil change, fixed the exterior mirrors, hood, driver's side, front bumper, trunk, and roof. It doesn't go into detail as to what. If you look at the pictures from their website, it still looks like there's swirls, scratches, chips, water spots, things like that. So this car could really use a pretty in-depth paint correction or heavy polish done to it. So the water spots, you can remove those with, you know, I have almost 30 years experience as a detailer, so I'm very knowledgeable about taking things like that out, and a lot of that is fixable. Basically, if the scratch you can feel with your fingernail, you're not going to completely get it out. You can basically kind of curve the edges to it so it's less visible, but you're not going to get everything out. When you, again, look further into the pictures that they're showing on their website, they state and disclose that some of the defects are water spot edging on the driver's front door, scratch on the front fender, the driver's side, chips on the hood, the front passenger fender, water spots on the trunk, wear on the center console. Again, that's not unusual either. 35,000 miles to have that kind of wear, maybe, but that just probably tells me that this car's probably had a lot of small or short trips. So again, looking from the outside looking in, paperwork looks okay, just a bunch of owners, has a couple of defects. You know, it's not unreasonable for a almost 10-year-old car with a bunch of owners, but with the low miles, you know, there's quite a few defects there. Maybe it's sat outside, it was parked next to a sprinkler or something, and that's where all the water spots came from. Who knows? But the point is, just from the outside looking in, looking at the service history, things like that, you think, okay, well, things look pretty good. So the big red flag for me is the age of which, or the length of which this car has been for sale. And so I watch these cars very, very closely, as you probably expect. But as soon as it went live, it immediately showed purchase in progress, which means that someone put a deposit down on it and started the process of it. And Carvana, of course, has the 7-day return policy, no questions asked. I think it's 500 miles, something along those lines. Well, this car has been purchased in either canceled or purchased and returned several times. It would show purchase in progress. You'd look a week later, it's still available, no purchase in progress. Well, in several of the groups that I'm in, one of the guys actually went as far as purchasing it. And once he got it, he realized that there are some other issues at play here. He said that it looked like the quarter panel, the rear quarter panel has been repainted, the front fender has been repainted, and there's overspray on the windshield and on the front cowl. So there's a lot of unreported things here that are going on with this car that if you're going to purchase it, there needs to be a lot more investigation done. Other things that of note that have not been done on the service history, any of the navigation updates where it shows the incorrect position. So, you know, for example, you're over on a service road when you're actually on the main highway or something. That has not been done. None of the servos have been repaired or replaced. The low pressure fuel pump buzzing, that hasn't been done, the update to that. So there's a lot of stuff, being that this car hasn't been very, very heavily dealer serviced, there's a lot that hasn't been addressed on it. And so on top of that, the carbon fiber, you know, you've heard me talk about this in the other videos, the carbon fiber trim on these cars is subject to delamination. Typically, you will find it happening more in the northern climates, but it does happen in the south for those of you that use the air conditioning pretty heavily. If the vents are blowing on the carbon fiber, it'll start to delaminate. If you look very closely at the pictures on this, you can see it may be a reflection on the rear, but behind the center console, the rear vents, you can see that you start to see some white spots where it looks like it's starting to delaminate, but that could be reflection. But on the passenger side front, it looks like it's just, you can start to see some white spots, like it's just now starting to delaminate or beginning to. So again, that would be something I would be aware of. The others don't look too bad. The Stratus Gray is pretty difficult to keep clean, so it does look very well kept. There's a little bolster wear on the driver's side, which is to be expected. You know, I would call the interior probably average wear for the age and the mileage. The center console being worn, that's probably somebody getting in and out of the car using their elbow, and it's just kind of wearing the suede down that's there on the center console. Those are not inexpensive to replace, about $300 or $400 to replace those, but you know, I'm just setting that out if that's something that bothers you. What is my opinion of this car? I would keep looking if it were me. If I'm looking for a car right now, for a GSF right now, there's always others that'll pop up. This one, despite the low miles, I think that there's probably something else being hidden here that I think that you could just move on and go find a different one. And Stratus gray interior is not for everybody. I don't really care for it. I think it's neat, but I wouldn't want to have to live with it as a daily driver or as a third car like this one is. The service history is questionable at best. So the fact that all of the common customer service program items, the ZLZ even, the ZLZ, the cracked or deforming dash, sticky dash, you know, some of the things like that, none of those except the high pressure fuel pump recall have been done on this car. So expect that you either need to get it done right away, because a lot of these expire when this car is 10 years from the in-service date. It was in service in early 2016, so you basically have until early 2026 to get these addressed for free. Otherwise, you're gonna start paying out of pocket to get some of this repaired. So again, like I said, I would probably move on from this car. I'm not gonna use the term buyer beware with this one, but I think this one warrants a more thorough inspection than you would typically do for a 9 or 10-year-old Lexus. The valley plate, of course, is always an issue. This car, being that it doesn't have a lot of miles, may not pop up just yet, but as you've heard me talk about in other videos, the valley plate leak that is notorious on the 2UR engine, it's basically the number of heat cycles and age. So it could maybe become an issue. If you were going to go have this car have a mechanical inspection, I would definitely check for that. So, and then finally, the price. You said they've started at $60,000 and they've dropped it $5,000 in 2 months. I think, despite the miles, I think they're still high for this car, considering what it needs or could potentially need. You know, I think probably closer around 50,000. But if this car was perfect with not 7 owners, if it was a 1 or 2 owner car with 35,000 miles, everything else is ready to go, I think they'd have no problem getting 55 grand for it in this market. I think this car's closer to 50,000, not a 55 or even 60,000 like they were asking. And the fact that they've been slowly coming down on the price, you know, I didn't catch this if it was for sale at a dealer auction or anything like that, a wholesale auction, so I don't know, I couldn't tell you what they paid for it. They probably took it in on trade somewhere. That's VIN 877. Have you guys, any of you guys out there, have you looked at it? Have you seen it? I'm waiting for the post in one of these groups that says, hey guys, thanks for the ad. I just picked this car up. Anybody know anything about it? So that's why doing your due diligence on these cars is so important, and that's why I'm doing these videos for you guys, so you can avoid getting a bad one or one that could potentially have issues. There are plenty of good ones out there. When they do come out there, I try to bring them up so somebody can grab them. Previous sales, so this car was sold new in Florida, and it was sold $88,000 in 2016, April of 2016. So it was it wasn't one of the very first ones sold, either that or they sat around for a while, as these cars did sometimes. So the very next sale was in June of 2021, also in Florida with 12,000 miles for $50,000. So how's that for some depreciation? March of 2021, so only 2 months later, 12,000 miles in New Jersey for $58,000. So the price magically went up $8,000. October 2022, it was still going up in price, $59,000. This was probably the height of COVID mania. You know how I've talked about the sales depreciation in the past with these cars, how they started to depreciate, they had that COVID bump, and then they started going back down until they flattened out last year in summer of 2024, and they've slowly been rising. So 17,000 miles in Texas, October 2022, for $59,000. January 2023, so somebody didn't hold on to it very long. Next owner, it was asking $54,500 with 21,000 miles still in Texas. And then June 2025, again started at 60 at Carvana with 35,000 miles here in Texas. and now asking $55,000 for it. If you bought this car 4 years ago, not only would you drive it for free, you would actually have made money on it, and based on the previous sales. And you know, these cars, they have held their value very strong since COVID. Post-COVID, the values have stayed strong. Prior to COVID, they were tanking pretty quick. Some of these higher mile 2016s you could get in the 30s, and now the only way you're going to find that is if they have 150, 200,000 miles or a rebuilt title, something like that, or some other issues. I think Carvana is basing their asking price strictly on the mileage and the fact that it has no accidents. But again, 7 owners, has some other issues that need to be addressed, taken care of. You know, if it were me, again, I would move on. If you're watching this and you purchase this car, let me know in the comments. You can hit me up. I can give you all the info I have on it. I have previous sales pictures from when it was new to every time it was listed for sale, except for one of the sales. And so you can see the progress of it. You can see the pictures, things like that. I've posted some of them in this video, but that's why I do these videos, guys. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you soon.